Hey, this is Crane, and this is a rep review for Specialist. This is a PVT on Polypoid. We open up with the 23 Nexus versus a kind of a modified FD. And prior to this point, 6 minutes, there's not much to comment on. I think you did a good job. The only issue is our observer timing. So with your opening, we should have an observer popping at 6 minutes. But we got a gateway before our robo. We delayed this observatory by quite a bit, and then we don't start our observer on time. So we end up being about a minute late on this observer. And this is critical. The most extreme thing that could happen in this situation is a 4 factory. A 4 fact is going to be pushing around 7 minutes. So if our observer pops at 7 minutes, there's no way we can actually see the 4 factory coming. It would arrive at our base before we can add gates or make a shuttle or anything. So watch your early game and see why this observer is late and try to adjust that. My next comment is that our pylon management seems to be a little bit off in making this pylon wall here. So at this stage, you should just have dragoons at each of these ramps blocking our choke, and then you can spread them out in these areas just to cover a little bit more area. And then as we need pylons, we should be adding them as walls. The fact that you added these 3 pylons prematurely actually impacts our second gas and our citadel timing by quite a lot, and that ends up delaying our arbiter tech later on. So try to only add these pylons as you need them and use dragoons to block off walls. The next comment is in the 6 minute to 9 minute range, our primary focus should be on constant probes and tech timing. And in this game, we miss on both of those marks a bit. So at 9 minutes with a standard PVT, you should be around 60 probes, depending on what's occurred. In this game, because you had a 6 minute nexus, you should actually be closer to 65. So we're quite a bit low on probes. And I would say that the most important thing in PVT is hitting the appropriate number of probes at 9 minutes. It's just the most important thing in PVT. So watch between 6 and 9 minutes, see where those gaps are, why they're there. Are we supply blocked? Are we attention starved? What is it? Why aren't we making these probes on time? The other comment is our tech again is quite delayed. Here it looks like we forgot or misclicked or whatever on our archives. So our arbiter tech is going to eventually be about 2 minutes late between the delay from these pylons, the delay from the archives, etc. Arbiters are quite late, and obviously that's really important in PVT. This attack here, we see that Terran took a really fast third, and we decide to try to punish it, which is a totally acceptable way to play, except that our build does not allow us to punish this. So we took a super fast third and we went into super fast tech. We did not get a reaver. We didn't add additional gateways. So we have no mechanism to actually punish this. So the correct answer, I would say, is we should allow Terran to take this third and instead just take our fourth around 8 minutes, 30 seconds. Terran can't punish that. We cannot punish this third. So if we want to be punishing thirds, I'd say that we should be gearing up for that. We should be going for reaver or additional gateways or something in order to actually punish this. But in this case, we trade decently well. We kill 6 tanks and 4 Goliaths for 12 Dragoons, which is a decent trade. But I would argue that if Terran was just a little bit more prepared, and when I say that, I think literally 1 mine here and 1 mine here, and this fight goes very differently for us. I think we would lose a lot of Dragoons for almost nothing if there were just 2 mines here. So this attack should not have done as much as it did, and it still did not kill this command center. It didn't do any actual damage to Terran. We traded relatively evenly for no benefit. And I'd also like to point out, at this point, if everything was appropriately timed with our tech, we would actually be really gas-starved right now. We'd be transitioning from Dragoons into Zealots, and we'd be starting our Arbiter very soon. So losing these 12 Dragoons and having to replenish that would be really punishing. We wouldn't be able to both make our Arbiter and our Dragoon replenishment on time. So we'd either have a delayed Arbiter, or we'd be short on Dragoons and be vulnerable to Vulture run-bys. So the 9-minute point is actually pretty critical for Dragoon count. So losing these is pretty painful. So instead, I would have liked to see fourth base at around 8:30. So from here, we see, we're floating quite a bit. We realize our tech is delayed, so we start our archives and we double expand. And so I have some comments on this decision to take 2 Nexuses here. So a typical PvT, the Terran will stay on 3 bases for quite a while. They sometimes take a 4th and sometimes don't, but in this situation where Terran's on 3 bases, we really have 2 routes. We will basically always take a 4th as early as we safely can, and then we're going to go up to 8 gateways, continue on our tech path. We'll add a cannon in each mineral line, and then at around 150 to 160 supply, we can either add a 5th Nexus, or we can go up to 12 gateways and bust when we're maxed. And this is assuming Terran never takes a 4th, right? Or takes it very, very late. There really isn't a situation where we want to take a 5th Nexus versus 3-base Terran this early. This is very early. And so we'll see in a second why this is problematic. We don't have an opportunity to make good pylon walls. We don't have an opportunity to make cannons in the appropriate places or to have our Dragoons positioned appropriately. So we end up losing about 20 workers, and this game would have been much, much cleaner if we had not taken this base, because we would have just had our Dragoons positioned here and here, and we would have lost no probes, right? So I think against a 3-base Terran, we should only be taking a 4th base until at least around 150 supply. If Terran reacts by taking a 4th command center, then we can absolutely take a 5th and 6th, no problem. But in this situation, we should have delayed. So another comment would be, I always try to take my 5th at another natural if it's a 3 or 4 player map. And so this becomes pretty clean because we take our 4th base close, and then we immediately after taking this 4th, we can send a observer and a Dragoon to clean out any vultures and mines that could be here, and send a probe to start making a pylon wall. So like these pylons here, a couple of these pylons are excess. We don't need them in our main. They could wall off this here. We don't have a Nexus yet, but we wall this off early. And so this means that when we're ready to take a 5th and a 6th, and when we're ready to add gateways, this area is secure. We're not going, oh shoot, he has a 4th, I need to take a 6th base or a 5th base, and going, let me clear this out, because that's very attention expensive to send a Dragoon to clean this out. It's very hard. Additionally, when we're ready to add gateways, we should have pylons already in place. The goal in PvT is, as we max out, we should be adding gateways with every mineral left over. We shouldn't be floating and going, oh, now I'll add 10 gateways or whatever. We should be adding them as we get the minerals. So that means we need this area fully cleaned out with pylons in position as we max. So if we do it right after our 4th is secured and get this area cleaned out, we're ready to go. We can add gates, we can add nexuses, we can do whatever we need to. So I highly recommend that. So from here, 12 minutes in a super macro PVT like this, we should be maxing out. So obviously we're quite short here. Some of that is the 24 supply of Dragoons that we lost on this attack here. Some of it is the 20-ish supply that we lost of probes. But even accounting for both of those, we would be shy by 30-ish supply of max right now. And that can be explained by the fact that we didn't have the right probe count at 9 minutes. So again, try to hit that mark and you should be able to max out much, much faster. Additionally, our arbiter should be finished and very nearly with a stasis right now. But we're about 2 minutes late on that. We end up maxing around 14 minutes here. And when we max out in PVT, we should have a plan. We either need to bust, and that can be either right when we get 100 energy on our first arbiter, or it can be at max out. Either one's fine. But we should do something, right? We should be busting with that attack. Or if we want to wait for Terran, that's a totally fine option, but that means that we should be adding on gateways. Like I said earlier, as we max out and have excess minerals, we should be making gateways. So right now we should have 10 gateways down and be very low on minerals. But because we don't have this area cleaned out, or this area, we don't have space for that. We could be adding on some here, but not enough. So what we're going to see in this game is that we should have 25 to 30 gateways because we're waiting on Terran and their max out is very slow as well. But we only have 10 gateways to their 10 factories. So when Terran finally pushes out, we have at first a really good engagement, but because we don't have the appropriate gateway count and instead we're triple expanding, we can't reinforce appropriately. So these nexuses do nothing for us. We should go up to no more than 2 bases ahead of Terran. There's no reason to go in excess of that because the efficiency that we gain from that mining is relatively minor. You're not going to spread out your probes much more. And if Terran is on 4 bases, they're going to mine out before the extra bases are relevant. So these bases should never be taken. Or I say never. They should not have been taken in this game. Instead, that money and effort should have been gateways. So the fight should be coming up here in a second. I think you handled the fight decently well. It could have been more spread out with our army, but our stasises were fantastic, and we end up trading really well here. A couple comments. One, our probe count is extremely high, as well as our opponent's SCV count. These both should be around 65-ish. Anywhere between 60 and 70 I think could be argued for, but I always target 65. And so these armies are relatively small, which means the relative impact of these stasises is very high. So the fact that you got good stasises is not only made this fight go extremely well for you because of the small army counts, but it was critical to this fight going well. So probe count should be lower. We should have another 10 zealots here. The other issue with this engagement is we should be backing out right now. We cleaned up half the army. We're in actually a great position. If we had 25 or 30 gateways, we would already be maxed right now. But we should back up. We should send this army back right now. Don't lose it to the stasis being relieved, because we're going to just get demolished by these tanks. So we could have been at 180 to 140 supply with these gateways. It could be at 200 versus 160 supply if we had additional. But instead we lose all of these Dragoons And right now, I would say the game is basically over. We've lost our army. We're below in supply. And there's another 15-ish minutes of stuff that happens. But right now, I would say the game is 95% in favor of Terran. So if we had pulled back and re-engaged with our reinforcements, I'd say that we would have easily taken care of this army. But that was just an error, I guess. So to summarize real quick at the end, focus on your observer timing, your tech timing, and your 65 probes timings, and focus on our base positioning and timing when we take additional bases later. And then with our late game, make sure that we're not throwing away our dragoons after we half win a fight. It's okay to just retreat and engage later, and ensure that we have enough gateways.